live video.
If people aren't wearing masks, should I get some and ask them to or even make a little announcement on the speaker maybe?
I'll make an announcement on the
Because
side.
I don't mind taking one over.
I have people raise their hands if they need them. We do have some at John got out. If
Yeah,
not,
they're right back there.
yeah.
So you want to say it? I'll
say
have
it.
them and I'll hand them out if people need them.
I'll say it, yeah. So I need to talk about masks,
Signing the book. Yep.
restrooms. Hello and welcome. Before we start the service, I just want to take care of a few business matters. I want to remind everyone that there's a guest book. If you didn't get a chance to sign it before now, please do so after the service for the family to take home. Also, our building is closed, but for urgent restroom use, you may go in through the door on the end. We just ask one person at a time per restroom. So if you see someone waiting outside the door, just wait a minute. And also, we're asking everyone to stay masked if you're not speaking. If anyone does not have a mask, we do have some at the back for anyone that needs them. As I said, I welcome you and thank you for being here today as we mourn the death of John Hemington and celebrate his life. Let us be honest with death. Let us not pretend that it is less than it is. It is separation. It is sorrow. It is grief. But neither let us pretend that death is more than it is. It is not annihilation. As long as memory endures, John's influence will be felt. It is not an end to love. Humanity's need for love from each of us is boundless. It is not an end to joy and laughter. Nothing would less honor John's vibrant soul than to make our lives drab and counterfeit respect. In this time of loss, in this time of asking why, we light a flame of sharing, we light a flame of commitment. In this time of why, we light this flame, sign of our searching, sign of our sharing, sign that together we remember, together we ask why, together in sadness and in joy, we share light. To everything, turn, turn, turn. There is a season, turn, turn, turn. And there's time to every purpose under heaven. A time to be born, a time to die, a time to plant, a time to reap, a time to kill, a time to heal, a time to laugh, a time to weep. To everything, turn, turn, turn. There is a season, turn, turn, turn. And a time to every purpose under heaven. A time to build up, a time to break down, a time to dance, a time to mourn, a time to cast away stones, a time to gather stones together. To everything, turn, turn, turn. There is a season, turn, turn, turn. And a time to every purpose under heaven. A time of love, a time of hate, is a season, turn, 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 and a time to every purpose under heaven. A time to gain, a time to lose, a time to rend, a time to sow, a time for love, a time for hate, a time for peace. I swear it's not too late. We're here today, as I said, to celebrate the life of John Hemington, his deep love for his family, his lifelong interest in learning, his truly deep passion for social justice and environmental justice, his service to this church and to this community. For those who knew and loved him, John's death leaves a very distinct John Hemington-shaped hole in the universe. We cannot fill that hole today, but we can honor the person who left it. We can surround this empty space with our memories of John and the caring and concern that he imparted to those whose lives he touched. Surely there is much to grieve today, and just as surely there is much to celebrate. I ask you to share one another's grief while also sharing one another's happiness to have known John and the great light that he brought into this world. I'm going to read a passage from the poem Little Gidding by T.S. Eliot. John included this excerpt at the beginning of a book that he wrote some years ago. Love of a country begins as an attachment to our own field of action and comes to find that action of little importance, though never indifferent. History may be servitude, history may be freedom. What we call the beginning is often the end, and to make an end is to make a beginning. The end is where we start from. The moment of the rose and the moment of the yew tree are of equal duration. A people without history is not redeemed from time, for history is a pattern of timeless moments. We shall not cease from exploration, and the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time. Through the unknown, unremembered gate, when the last of earth left to discover is that which was the beginning. I'd like to share a brief biographical sketch of John's life based on the obituary that his family put together and based on my conversations with them and with John. John Hemington was born on July 16, 1944 in Uniontown, PA, and graduated from McGuffey High School in 1962. His first attempt at college was not an entire success, and he ended up taking a break from school and joining the Army, serving as an audio specialist assigned to the 15th PSYOP Detachment Strategic Headquarters in Okinawa. After returning home, John's sister introduced him to Carrie Lee Lightholder, whom he married, I believe, in 1973, after having graduated from West Virginia University with a degree in social work. While studying at Morgantown, John interacted with miners from the area and became more acquainted with the challenges of those working people and laborers. He earned a law degree from Antioch School of Law focusing on public interest law. As part of his law education, I understand that he and his fellow students spent time living and working among the urban poor, learning about the plight of those who have been marginalized in our society. He went on to practice law in Uniontown and here in the South Hills of Pittsburgh. He left the practice of law to help form several computer software and information technology businesses. Later, he gained much satisfaction from his many years of work managing computer systems for the Watson Institute, which provides education and support for special needs children and their families. Societal injustice troubled him deeply. His passion was reading to understand life, history, politics, economics, and the world. He spent countless hours writing about and sharing what he read with a large group of friends by email, and I'll talk a little bit more about John's emails in just a moment. Through his active membership in the Battle of Homestead Foundation and as a founding member of the Isaac Walton League of Allegheny County, he worked to realize a small part of the social, economic, and environmental justice that was central to his life. John was a longtime member of this church where he had many good friends and loved discussing current events, among other things. John was also an avid golfer, as many of you know. I will always remember John as someone who had an extraordinarily active life of the mind. His brain was always working, trying to make sense of the world and trying to find solutions to the many injustices of our world, especially with regard to issues of class and economic injustice. I marveled at his seemingly inexhaustible intellectual energy and rigor, reading book after book, article after article, and not just reading and absorbing the material, but analyzing and synthesizing it and coming up with his own carefully reached conclusions. He was a true self-made intellectual, a person for whom understanding and reflecting were of ultimate importance, and not just arriving at new understandings, but determining ways to act based on these understandings. I can't tell you how many reading recommendations John made to me in the time that I knew him, but they numbered in the dozens, if not the hundreds. Not long after I first arrived here in Pittsburgh 7 years ago, John insisted on taking me out to lunch at a nearby Italian restaurant. He explained to me in detail his wide-ranging political, intellectual, social beliefs and agenda. It was a lot to take in. But I think it was important to John that I understand where he was coming from and that I not think of him as some crank, but as a serious person with serious ideas. And I did just that. I had a great deal of respect for John and John's ideas. I didn't always agree with them, but I always listened and I always took his ideas seriously because I knew that he arrived at them only after a great deal of thought. I know that many of you who are here today were on John's famous or perhaps infamous email distribution list. His email missives were impressive, both in their sheer quantity. It seemed like maybe 3 or 4 or more every week, as well as in their depth of analysis. There was nothing shallow about the ideas and issues that John was exploring. There were always deep ideas that cut to the core of the structure of our society. Ideas that had to do with systems of oppression and injustice that have plagued our nation since its inception. As I said, I didn't always agree with John's ideas, but I always respected them, and I always took them seriously. John participated in one or two small group ministry groups that I co-facilitated here at Sunnyhill, and I got to know him on a more personal level as a result of these experiences. These small groups, or chalice circles as we called them, are not meant to be intellectual discussion groups, but rather opportunities for sharing from the heart instead of just the mind. I was worried that John might stay in his head too much, but somewhat to my surprise, he did a very good job getting to that heart level and not just staying always with intellectual arguments. John shared with me a book that changed his life. It was a somewhat obscure volume by John Fowles titled The Aristos, a self-portrait and ideas, published in 1968. John emailed me the preface to the book with this note: Jim, one of the books which has most influenced my life was a little book of personal philosophy written in the late 1960s by John Fowles, The Aristos. Much of what he espouses in this volume is, I believe, relevant to our current predicament, particularly the idea that there is some black and white dividing line between people, their beliefs, and ideas. John went on to say, "This is what I was attempting to say after the service today, albeit ineptly. The Aristos was important enough to me," John says, "that years ago I typed the entire volume into an electronic document, fearing that it would go out of print, which it did." He said, "I have attached the preface to the book for you if you are not familiar with it. Few are." As I understand it, the idea that John was trying to impart to me, which he found in this book, was that the dividing line that is of ultimate importance is not that between what we think of good people versus bad people, however we define those terms. Rather, the more important dividing line is that which runs through each and every individual and presents us with a choice, whether to pursue that which is good and meaningful or that which is not. John often requested copies of my sermon manuscripts, and he sometimes included excerpts from them in his email messages. There was at least one sermon of mine delivered on Martin Luther King Day in 2019 that he shared in its entirety, along with a couple of other similarly themed sermons. I'm going to read an excerpt from that sermon, as I think it describes the kind of transformation that John wanted to see in the world. The sermon read in part as follows: Martin Luther King did not fight and die just to become a soundbite in yet another corporate public relations ploy. He did not fight and die just to become a touchstone for the delusion of post-racialism. He did not fight and die just to become a poster child for the myth of individual exceptionalism. King fought and died in the hope of sparking real and lasting transformation, and in the hope of building a resistance to conformity to unjust systems of oppression. The following words of King himself have never been more true than they are today. This hour in history needs a dedicated circle of transformed nonconformists. Our planet teeters on the brink of annihilation. Dangerous passions of pride, hatred, and selfishness are enthroned in our lives. Truth lies prostrate on the rugged hills of nameless Calvaries, and people do reverence before false gods of nationalism and materialism. The saving of our world from impending doom will come not through the complacent adjustment of the conforming majority, but through the creative maladjustment of a non-conforming minority. In my sermon, I went on, the false gods that King named are alive and well today. We see before us an ever-growing abundance of evidence of nationalism and materialism run amok. The dangerous passions of pride, hatred, and selfishness are enthroned not just in our own lives, but also in the life of our nation. And truth itself, lying wounded and bleeding on the ground, is endangered in a way that it has never been before. I concluded, our hope, our only hope, lies in what King called creative maladjustment, in refusing to be lulled into complacency, in recognizing and calling out injustices when we see them, and demanding something more than lip service and window dressing. John Hemington was what I would call a transformed nonconformist. Someone who was purposefully maladjusted to the status quo. John refused to be lulled into complacency. He recognized and called out injustices as he saw them, when he saw them, and he demanded something more than lip service and window dressing. I knew John as a passionate human being who loved his family, loved his community and his church, and was truly dedicated to justice for all. I hope and pray that each of us might learn something from his example and carry it forward. May it be so. Amen. In the blowing of the wind, we remember.
In the opening of buds, we remember.
We remember.
In the blueness of the sky, we remember.
As the year starts and it ends, we remember.
In the rustling of the leaves, we remember.
We remember.
When we're weary and need strength, we remember.
When we're lost and sick at heart, we remember.
When we've joys we yearn to share,
We remember. We remember. Some members of John's family would like to share some of their thoughts and memories of John with us now. And we'll start with Carrie Lee, and we'll set up this microphone right up front so you don't need to come all the way back here.
First, I just wanted to thank everyone for coming and for all the support that we've had from our friends at Sunnyhill and our family and all of our other friends. Thank you for being John's friends through all these years. Someone recently asked me how John would like to be remembered. I never asked him, but I think his answer would be as someone who loved people and never had too many friends, as someone who questioned and sought truth diligently, and as someone who let his little light shine. How will I remember him? He was very honest, if not always tactful. Shortly after we met, he did a life dump, leaving out nothing. So I knew what I was getting into. One thing I didn't know was his love of driving fast. He didn't display that until we were married. I also didn't reveal that I had a tendency toward motion sickness. Until we were on our honeymoon, he was driving fast on the Skyline Drive, and I just had to say, "Pull over." During our courtship, he said he drove slowly because he wanted to spend as much time with me as possible. Through the years, he was my love and my best friend, steadfast, loyal, and true. He took me along all of his explorations and travels of the mind, through religion, history, economics, politics, and more. I asked not to be on the mailing list. But he always put a short stack of must-reads, curated for me, at my place at the kitchen table. Amazon prospered from his monthly book purchases. He read all of them too, mostly. He was always willing to do whatever he thought would make me happy within limits. Having children was not his idea, but he loved them very much. He was proud of them, and I see much of him in them. He was happy mostly to stay home and read, but he took me on travels around the U.S. and Canada in our motorhome, giving me many happy memories and great stories that often involved something going wrong and how he reacted to it. Like the time he pulled into our assigned site at a campground and entertained a bunch of campers sitting in their lawn chairs, watching as John tried to operate the leveling system. It was automatic, but there was a manual override. I coached him from outside as he tried over and over and over again. The motorhome went up and down, up and down, up and down, never ending up level. Finally, the leveling system just quit. I went silently inside our unleveled motorhome to get away from the staring eyes. He would rather have been a race car driver with a pit crew to take care of the RV maintenance and breakdowns. Lately, our concern about the effects of climate change, he was willing to consider my idea of turning most of our lawn into native plants that support pollinators and other insects and birds, even though He loved riding the lawnmower and mowing the grass. We never fought. We disagreed. But our differences were almost always settled before bedtime when he hugged me and reminded me that he loved me and that I was the best. Through the years, we managed to be patient with each other and compromise to meet each other's needs. I could count on him to rescue me without question whenever I needed help, be it straightening and cleaning the house when company was coming and my perfectionism was getting in the way, or finding things I'd misplaced, or getting a new job at the Watson Institute for Family Security so I could transition to being an independent planning consultant. The work he did at Watson Institute turned out to be the most satisfying of his working life. Thank you all for listening.
Bryce Johnson.
So I wrote quite a bit, but I think I'm going to boil it down to one story, which is about the Wax Pancake Museum. And if you've not heard about it, it's because it doesn't exist. But we were on a family trip, and we were nearing the end of it, getting to the destination. And I don't know what prompted it, and there was never an explanation for it. But at some point or another, he decided, as we were getting there, there was a IHOP or Waffle House or something of the like, and he decided to tell us that was a Wax Pancake Museum, and that in there you were going to see all sorts of different varieties of pancakes with different toppings, different things, all made out of wax, nothing edible there. You could only go and take a look at them. And even as a kid, and I think Carrie can attest to this was just unworldly that this thing would exist, but he was so insistent upon it and so rarely tried to pull tricks on us that eventually his insistence became the truth. So by the time we arrived at our hotel, we were convinced that this was in fact the Wax Pancake Museum. We were going to it tomorrow. We were going to see wax pancakes in the real, with all the toppings and accoutrement that would go with it. And there was no real punchline other than just pulling the wool over our eyes. But it's just one of those things that, like, when I think about him, it was that, like, idea of just being like, I'm going to do this thing, and I'm going to go all the way, and I'm just going to do it. And I think it got him in trouble a little bit, but I don't know. It's just something I think about that I really truly treasure as a thing that he did.
We're going to open things up a little bit now for anyone else who would like to share a story or personal remembrance about John briefly. If you do want to speak, come up to this microphone so that you can be heard. Is there anyone that has a... Come on up.
I'm sure I have the same story as almost everyone here, because I got emails almost every day. John taught me so much. This is amazing. When I met John about 10 years ago, because I moved to Peters Township when I married Susan, he was sending emails to Susan, and Susan was saying, well, it's a lot of reading. But when I first met John, after reading a few of the emails, and he started giving me books every week, maybe every day for a while, I realized that I had missed out on so many things that he knew about, and I learned so much from him, particularly about economics, because, I had read the usual economic books that are sitting on everybody's shelf, probably written from the Chicago school in the 1920s, and And I would then try to pass this on to my friends, and they would say, is this true? And I would say, would you believe in medicine that was written in 1920? Then would you believe in gardening that was written in 1920? Or why would you believe economics that was written in 1920? But John had such a powerful way of doing things, and it was such an important part of my life after I moved to Peters Township. It's a big hole, and not just the absence of email messages. John was a wonderful friend. I really miss him.
Hello, Dennis. I would hear John call me once or twice a week for more than 8 years. Hello, Dennis. That was our sign that it was time for golf. We played everywhere. We played in Pennsylvania, New York. We played in West Virginia. Any place that had standards that were adequate enough for us to show up, we played golf. In those 8.5, 9 years, I got to know John pretty well as an excellent companion, an honest golfer, and someone who liked to drive fast in a golf cart. So we, over time, developed a companionable competition. We never bet, but if he outdrove me, he said, If I outputted him, I would go, And that was about all we said about the game. We were not great, we were just greatly enthusiastic. John played quite well as a younger man. In fact, he was almost a scratch golfer. That meant he played almost at par, but time and age and used by dates on parts of our body slowed him down considerably. But still, he was doggedly optimistic about his golf game. Now, golfers tend to be somewhat magical and superstitious. We get magical about our balls that we buy, the clubs that we get, the swing tips that we get. They are going to magically transform our games to make us something worthy of the PGA Tour. Later, I found out from an instructor that, Dennis, it's not the arrow, it's the Indian. I was more of an Indian kind of person, and I would look at YouTube to find out the magic swing thought. John was more of an arrow person. He would endlessly look for the correct club. In fact, at one golf course that has a Demon 18 hole, he bought one club, a 4-iron, for one shot over a pond. That's the only time he ever used it. John was a firm believer in potions of various kinds. He had a pillbox that took 2 people to carry. On the course, though, he had his own concoctions. The first year and a half we played together, he had a thermos that he would drink from, and I often wondered why he didn't just get bottled water. Finally, I found out that it was gin and tonic. He was an avid gin lover, and he would tell me about Holland gins and how I should try that. But I never really drank while I was playing golf until it was all over. As his health deteriorated and his foot started to cause him problems, his golf game did suffer. So he relied on energy drinks, the ones that have 40 pounds of caffeine in a little itty-bitty bottle. And he would drink those at about the 9th hole to get him through the rest of the day. He also developed his own special brownies. that later became Own's Special Cookies. And that seemed to help his mood, didn't seem to help his game very much. But it was always entertaining to see John take this little baggie out of his pocket and take that. Last year was not a great year for John. He had an operation on a bone of his foot that took ages, almost 12 months to heal. And we didn't play golf, and I missed him. I truly missed him. I have other people that I play golf with, dear friends that I've known for almost 40 years. I play golf with them once a week. But John was a special golfer for me, and I missed him during that year. Magically, this March, in the middle of March, the phone rang. Hello, Dennis. John was making a comeback. The first couple times we played, his golf was pretty raggedy. But the Wednesday before he died, 4 of us went out to play golf, and he had the best golf I have ever seen him play. Now, I rarely see John get giddy, but if he could have danced, he would have danced, despite his bad foot. I will miss John terribly. More than terribly. There is a hole here that will not be replaced. But the only thing that makes me happy is John's last golf game was superb. So all I can say is goodbye, John.
One of the problems with getting old is you have all this equipment like hearing aids and stuff like that you gotta My name is Mike Stout, and I'm the president of the Allegheny County chapter of the Isaac Walton League, and I'm also one of the founding members of the Battle of Homestead Foundation. And along with the Unitarian Church, they were 2 organizations most dear to John's heart, and that he was most involved in over the last 5 years. I met John about 5 years ago, and somebody, a co-friend named J.T. Campbell, brought him to the Battle of Homestead Foundation. We have a thing called the Pump House Gang. The Pump House Gang is about 40 or 50 of us that meet every Wednesday morning at Eaton Park, and we are, most of us, radicals, most of us pro-union, anti-war, retired from the movement, and some of us not so retired. John came to breakfast, sat next to me, and I felt like I met somebody that not only I was going to learn to love and be a good friend with, but somebody that was more than just a brother. And a lot of people are going to get up and tell you, yeah, John sent us a lot of emails, and we agreed with some of them, and, didn't agree with some of them. I was the person that agreed with just about all of them, and discussed and became one of my best friends. And when Carolee called me Saturday and told me that John had passed, I didn't just have a hole in my heart, I had a hole in my brain, and I had a hole in my soul. And John and I were on the phone, as Carolee can attest, just about every week. He came to our house as often as he could. When John came, he didn't just tell me about a book. He actually brought the book and bought it for me and gave it to me. I have an entire 2 shelves of books that I got from John Hemington. And the reason John Hemington liked the Battle of Homestead Foundation, and he liked the Isaac Walton League, and for those of you that don't, there's about 8 of us scattered throughout the crowd here with our t-shirts on, because John was one of our founding members. And John joined the Isaac Walton League because he wanted to put his ideas into practice. He wanted to walk the walk, not just think the think and talk the talk. And he knew what we were all about. We were all about 2 things that were dear to John's heart. and some people have already spoken to it. One is the truth, and two is solidarity. Solidarity is just another word for love. And that's why John Hemington fell in love with the Battle of Homestead Foundation. That's why he fell in love and became an active and founding member of the Isaac Walton League. And that's why I fell in love with John Hemington, and why he is not just a friend, but as far as I'm concerned, he is my brother. And he will always be my brother. And John was one of those people, you know, we talked about this, and we talked about things, I think Carol Lee knows this, that he didn't talk about with most people. We shared brownies. We shared cookies. We shared thoughts and ideas and discussions that John didn't share with probably too many people except for Carol Lee. We shared things about, is there God? Is there really a God out there? If there is, what is it, that God? Deep questions. And John was one of those people, and we discussed this many times, most people out there, they're on the surface, and they really, really don't want to know what's below them. They don't want to know what's under the ground they walk on. And then there's those people that scratch the surface, below the surface, and gnaw the surface to find out. Well, John took a bulldozer to the surface, and he dug as deep as he could. And when he found what he found, he realized that he didn't just find a piece of the truth, but he realized that the search for the truth was eternal, and that he dedicated his life not only to finding the truth, not only to building solidarity amongst people and organizations and causes, but that work for him was eternal. John's mind, his brain, as far as I'm concerned, outpaced any computer I've ever seen and any computer user I've ever seen. I never saw anybody that not only read as voraciously as he did, but absorbed what he read and imparted it and passed it on to others. And I want you to know that he was not only active, but he was our biggest financial supporter. He put his money where his mouth is. And he didn't put his money there because he just was part of the organization. He liked the fact that we're planting thousands of trees. He liked the fact that we're composting. He liked the fact that we're teaching people regenerative agriculture. He put the money where his mouth is because that's what he wanted to see happen and what changes he wanted to see in this world. And I just want to tell everybody here that I thought hard and deep about John. First off, I couldn't stop crying the first day, Carol Lee. I just couldn't. His passing affected me as much as my sister and my brother, my blood sister and my blood brother, when they passed. And what really upsets me the most is when people die, is generally speaking for a day or a week or a month, people remember them and then they just kind of pass in time and life goes on, and it doesn't matter who you are, life continues on. And I tried to think about how can we remember John and how can I keep John's memory alive. Well, this is what I came up with. At the next meeting of the Isaac Walton League, I'm going to propose to the group, and we have 80 members in our little conservation group, and the Battle of Homestead Foundation has hundreds of members. And I'm going to propose that the Isaac Walton League Allegheny County chapter be renamed the Isaac Walton League John Hemington chapter. That way, people will constantly ask us, everywhere we go, everything we do, and long after I'm gone and we're all gone, just who the hell is John Hemington and what did he stand for? And I want you, everybody here, to know I loved him like a brother. I partied with him like a brother. And I will go down in history like a brother and make sure that everything he taught me and everything he gave us will continue on. And I want to give my deepest condolences to his family, because I do know, because John shared stuff with me he didn't share with anybody else except maybe you, Carol Lee. John loved his family, and he loved his family as much as he loved anything in the world. And on behalf of the Isaac Walton League, and on behalf of the Battle of Homestead Foundation and all my friends and all our comrades, he was very loved, he'll be very missed, and he will go on. Thank you.
I encourage everyone to keep sharing among one another at the end of our service today and as we go forward. I want to say thank you to everyone who shared today, and on behalf of John's family and on behalf of this church, thank you all for being here. It's been a real privilege to me to be here with you today in this time of remembering a wonderful person whose life clearly touched so many others so deeply. The family have brought some flowers to share with everyone here. So at the close of our service in just a moment, we encourage everyone to come forward and take a flower in memory of John, in celebration of his life, and in appreciation for the love and sharing and support that have been evident here today. For now, we'll close with these words. Let us honor the life of John Hemington by living ourselves more nobly and lovingly in the days ahead. As you return to the routine of your lives, go in peace, and may an abiding peace go with you. Amen.